Side 2 begins with All in a Mouse's Night. Written solely by Tony Banks, this is a light comical fable tale where Phil Collins sings as all the characters in it, not unlike Robbery, Assault and Battery from A Trick of the Tail, or even Peter Gabriel's Get 'Em Out by Friday from Foxtrot, or The Battle of Epping Forest from Selling England by the Pound. However, with those songs, Peter and Phil at least tried to pull up several different accents and other techniques to represent each character. Here, though, Phil has his same voice for the whole thing, which kinda sets it back a bit. Not enough to hinder the song, though, as a whole, just a little bit of a nitpick. As for the story itself, it involves a loving couple resting in bed while a mouse sneaks out of his little hole for a stroll and maybe to find a meal or two. But he's soon caught by the couple, and they decide to put him in a box for safety. Hope they put some little air holes and some food in it, maybe. However, the mouse escapes again and tries to find the kitchen and bread bin, but he gets caught again, this time by the cat. And after a little chase, his pounce ends up knocking over a jar and knocking him out, letting the mouse escape once more. Later on, the cat goes on to fabricate his story. I guess the cat can talk and has friends, claiming that a 10-foot tall monster mouse had backed him to a wall and attacked him, but he survived to live to tell the tale. Likely a way to hide and cover up his pitiful defeat. As you might guess, the song is apparently inspired by the classic Tom and Jerry cartoons. Not exactly confirmed per se, but it's still very likely. Not only with the sense of anthropomorphism, but also having a jar fall on the cat's head does sound like something that would happen to Tom, or maybe something that would happen between Lucifer, Jacques, and Gus from Disney's Cinderella. The song itself does cleverly dedicate certain sections of music or leitmotifs to each of the characters, which is a good detail which I admire from a band like Genesis. All in all, this is a decent, if not slightly cartoony song to listen to in a mouse's night. Next is Blood on the Rooftops. Co-written by Steve Hackett and Phil Collins, it starts off with the classical acoustic guitar melody, similar to Horizons from Foxtrot, and Collins sings this reflective allegory about the mundaneness of sitting at home watching TV all day as Banks' Mellotron comes into play. I guess he had to turn it on again? Huh? It also addresses certain traditions associated with British life, like watching the Queen on every Christmas Day, which I have no doubt my family and I are going to do anyways. Plus, a look at looking at the news regarding problems around the world with apathy and boredom, mentioning Jews and Arabs, as well as various locations such as Venice, Peking, and San Francisco. People watching decide to ignore them and asking to skip the news and make some tea, as if all the bad stuff doesn't really bother us one bit because it doesn't really affect us in any significant way. There are even a few shout-outs to pop culture figures like Tarzan, Batman, most likely the 60s Adam West series, and actor Errol Flynn. The song is honestly still relevant even after 45 years into this day and age. Just goes to show that some things never truly change forever. After that is a two-part instrumental, starting with the first half, Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers. Co-written by Hackett as well as Mike Rutherford, this is a short and haunting piece of guitar-centric music with some otherworldly synth sounds that wouldn't feel out of place alongside the various instrumental sections and interludes of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. In fact, while it's technically part of a continuous series of songs on its own though, this is actually the shortest song of the album, clocking at about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Then we get to the second part of the instrumental, In That Quiet Earth. co-written by Hackett and wrote for the game, as well as Banks and Collins this time around. This, along with the previous track, are directly named after the very last sentence of Wuthering Heights. Unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth. Which again kind of fits the whole wind, blustery, autumny feel to most of the album. After a very natural and well done transition, the tone and mood immediately change as we get into a very fast and adventurous section with electric guitars and clanging drums, just like with What Gorilla. It also feels a bit like a prototype to Duke's Travels from the Duke Suite. With this two-parter, they set out to showcase their musical talents as well as stretch their instrumental skills, and honestly, they did succeed in some way or another. And so the album ends with Afterglow, written by Banks himself, and boy is this a worthy closer to end such an album. Up there with Supper's Ready, Los Angeles, Duke's End, The Brazilian, and Fading Lights. It's mostly a love song that deals with loss, yearning, offering one's soul to someone they love, and realization of the people, the things that we consider truly important to us, and how we may have taken them for granted. Very much like Your Own Special Way. As it starts, Afterglow already sounds pretty beautiful and fantastic from the get-go, but when it reaches that third chorus with that key change, oof, do I feel like I'm ascending to enlightenment just from listening to that bit alone. It just gives off this sense of triumph, a glimmer of hope rising over the dark horizon, that after all the adventures and all the trials and hardships just across the songs of the album, that we've reached the end point with Afterglow, and all that journey, all that adventure was all worth it in the end. And funny enough, according to Banks himself, while he took about a year to get One for the Vine right, this one he took roughly the same amount of time to write and compose this track as it is to actually play it. So if someone like him can make and whip up a song this epic within the span of like 4 minutes or so, then that's the work and effort of a brilliant genius. And with all that said and done, Wind and Wuthering is an underrated album from a very well-known prog band like Genesis. It may not be as memorable as, say, Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, Lambs Lies Down, or even its predecessor, Trigger the Tail, or even some of the more pop-oriented stuff later, such as the Mama album, Invisible Touch, and We Can't Dance. But in some way, I consider this more of a transition album. In that little brief little period where Genesis was still kind of a four-member group and was still trying to recover from the recent departure of Peter Gabriel. And speaking of departures, this would indeed be the last album by Genesis to feature Steve Hackett in any significant way. Apparently, part of the reason was that Steve himself felt that a lot of his stuff, a lot of his material, were being kind of brushed aside in favor for more of Banks' stuff, and so soon afterwards, in '77, he left to do his own solo albums, which I won't entirely blame him for, though. But regardless of all that, this is still a very decent album. A lot of the songs here, regardless of whoever wrote them, are still pretty fantastic. Songs like One for the Vine, 11th Earl of Mar, Blood on the Rooftops, and Afterglow are merely fantastic, and they're very underrated Genesis songs. In a band that already makes a lot of underrated songs across all their eras and all their periods, and all the years from the 70s into the 80s and even 90s. So if you're a fan of Genesis or you want to get into Genesis, I say give this one a chance. If you like the classic 70s stuff, but you're more open to the more popular stuff, I say give this one a chance. this is one I think is definitely worth the wind and worth the wuthering. Next time, we conclude this festive season and this year as a whole, and you know what? Next week also happens to be Boxing Day, so why don't I tackle something that's at least related to Christmas in some way? So tune in next time, when I delve into I've been waiting far long enough for this. Who are... What are you? Who am I? What am I? I am one who have been waiting for over an Earth year to actually face you properly. My soul, my bones, my heart are pure crystal, stronger than steel itself. I was born and created in your image, or at least in the image of the one that you and some of your friends are mere parts of, fragments of a greater whole, a greater being. And what a role that I intend to take for myself. I am Space Anorak.